What makes a life meaningful? In the relatively quiet periods of my life, I find myself reflecting on this question. When I finally find my schedule clearing and my freedom temporarily handed back to me, the first question that springs to mind through the sheer jubilation of momentary liberation is, what do I do now? A seemingly banal question, but profound in its implications. To ask myself this question is to take the first tentative steps towards true happiness. So much of our lives are lived for us. So much of our time is taken up by the desires and interests of others. When suddenly we regain our permission to live, it can be startling. What do I do now?
Untended, I found time and time again that question soon becomes malignant. The initial brief spring of inspiration becomes a trickle. Soon we are overcome by boredom, and then finally, when the icy chill of wasted time breathes down our necks, the originally inspiring question, what do I do now, becomes a source of existential dread. What should I be doing? Why am I not doing? Who am I? And at that point, we begin to welcome the return of authority. We wish to escape from the question, and more often than not, we willingly cede our time again to others. So, quickly, we seek an answer to the initial question. We seek pleasure at first, but quickly realize pleasure doesn't cut it, because meaningless pleasure becomes simply a procession of sensations, and no sooner is pleasure gone than we are tormented by its absence. So instead we seek happiness, thinking it a higher form of aspiration. But happiness too is not enough. Meaningless happiness becomes like a balloon. It rises up and up and up until finally we forget why we ought to be happy in the first place. And so, I think somewhat ironically, we find ourselves back at the beginning, the source of all of our initial concerns, work. Although this time it's no longer the mindless drudgery of working for someone else. We come to realize the benefits of working on and for ourselves. I think one of the great ironies of life is that the thing that has caused so much suffering and so much social ennui, work, is in fact the thing that most of us crave most of all. More so than pleasure, more so than happiness, we want our lives to have meaning. We want our existence to be substantial, not just motes of dust or grains of sand blown this way and that. If we are to suffer, we want our suffering to have a purpose. We want it to contribute to something, for there to be some reason for it, not just meaningless suffering. If we are to have pleasure, or if we are to be happy, we want our happiness to be grounded. We don't want it to just be some untethered sensation, but an eternal spring that we can draw from again and again. And yet, despite knowing this, like some kind of internal gyroscope that we feel on the inside, writing itself as we go through the vicissitudes of fate, we never think to really look for meaning in that one place where we spend most of our lives, our work. For a lot of us, work is simply a means to an end, an inconvenient truth. We work so that we can live. It's something that we have to put up with. But as the greats throughout history have shown us, we are only ever truly alive through our works. It is in our natures to want to do, to create, and to bring into being. And in this process of creation, we also create ourselves. Or perhaps more accurately, we complete the missing pieces of ourselves. Because you see, as human beings, we are brought into the world materially complete, but spiritually empty. We are blank slates, tabula rasa. The process, the journey of life, is the journey of self-fulfillment, the narrative of self-actualization. This is the adventure that we were born for, or the destiny that we are called to, the prophecy that we inherit. And in this inheritance, we inherit not only ourselves and the world within, but also the world without. In self-sufficiency, we also realize empathy. That moment in our lives when we cease to look upon others as other and begin to recognize their struggles as our own. Meaningful work doesn't just complete oneself, doesn't just complete the missing pieces and bring them together. It also brings us together as a species.
We come to realize that work is not the enemy. The enemy is, as Marx identified almost 200 years ago, alienation. When the life-affirming act becomes life-denying, that is alienation. When the creation ceases to be creative, that is alienation. When our work no longer completes us, we are alienated. When our work is no longer meaningful, we are isolated.
This is true for the white-collar worker, this is true for the factory laborer, and this is true for the modern academic. In the midst of this postmodern revolution, we have become too comfortable with this myth of meaninglessness. History moves without eyes or ears, without a compass, a map, or even a guiding direction. The masters of the arts, the classicists, the philosophers, the philologists, and the anthropologists move without reference to each other. The sciences are united in their grand cosmic narrative. The arts retreat within themselves, splintering into fragments, breaking what was once whole. In this retreat, we forget to nourish the vitality of our works. We lose the security and the surety of knowing that we have something of value to offer the world. We forget ourselves. And no sooner do we feel the uncertainty of insecurity that we fabricate a new identity, an identity forged not from a point of pride, but from a point of ego. We fabricate words, build them up like bricks in our isolated towers. Doxastic belief, reflective equilibrium, functionalism, positivism, realism, intersectionality. The further we rise into the depths of our self-importance, the less we remember of the truths of our crafts, until finally we find ourselves alone. And let me tell you, it is a cold and windswept peak, our self-appointed pulpit. But placed so far from the ground, who will make the climb to receive our bounty? And when we look upon our works, hundreds and hundreds of cryptic pages never read, never understood, never heeded, is our alienation not complete? Now, I suspect that I am beginning to wax poetic, and of course there's nothing worse in this day and age than to be overly sentimental. So let me put things simply. I believe that there was never an idea worth knowing that could not be freely gifted to a child. And the sooner we internalize this truth and learn to simplify and find meaning through our works, the better we'll be. That's all I have to say for now. Until I see you again, goodbye.